Robby, what's on your radar?
Is it possible that the pandemic is over? If this year's annual Met Gala is any indication, the answer to that question depends on whether you're a commoner or a member of the ruling class. For most of us, the pandemic is very much not over. If you live in a southern state, Florida, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, you might still be reeling from COVID-19. Some of the hospitals nearby are probably hitting capacity as thousands of sick, unvaccinated COVID patients fill their beds. But let's say you live elsewhere, in an area of the country where the disease is well under control. Let's say you're vaccinated or have antibodies from a prior infection. According to the science, you could, in theory, safely resume normal life. You can discard your mask knowing there's very little chance that you'll get sick and very little chance you would spread COVID-19 to someone else. You have almost no chance, very low chance, of suffering severe disease or death. Is the pandemic over for you? It should be, but probably it isn't. That's because the government health officials now in charge of the entire country aren't ready to let the pandemic end for most people, even if they're extremely safe from the disease. Indeed, the government is imposing ever stricter mitigation measures by the day. Last week, President Joe Biden issued a vaccine mandate for 80 million private sector workers, with no exceptions for the naturally immunized. And he isn't letting up on masks either. His new plan requires that strong mask requirements remain in place. Locally, policymakers have taken the same approach. Consider Washington, D.C., where I live. Our 7-day average for COVID deaths is 0. By any reasonable measure, the emergency has ended in the nation's capital. Our vaccination rate is high, and the vaccines are working. But when you enter any indoor space, you are still required by law to wear a mask. Unless you're D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, that is. The city's mayor, who reimposed the mask mandate in late July, has thrice been caught maskless at public events, including her own birthday party and a wedding. Here she is just a few days ago. She makes the rules, we follow them. This has been a recurring theme of the pandemic, of course. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who recently survived his recall attempt, imposed brutal restrictions on his citizens and demanded extreme social distancing, but had no compunction about attending a lavish private dinner with a lobbyist at the luxurious French Laundry. At the start of the pandemic, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot told city residents that they should delay getting haircuts. "Getting your roots done is not essential," she said. Did you catch that? Your roots are not essential. She wasn't including herself. Mayor Lightfoot absolutely went out for a haircut and, when caught, justified it by saying, "I'm the public face of the city. I'm on national media and I'm out in the public eye." This reality, one law for America's political aristocracy and another for the commoners, has been brutally obvious for much of the pandemic. But I'm not sure it was ever quite so galling until earlier this week, when celebrities, athletes, and politicians, everyone from Jennifer Lopez to Megan Rapinoe to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, dressed up in outlandish costumes for the Met Gala, an annual celebrity fashion fundraiser at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The theme this year was In America, a lexicon of fashion, though many attendees looked like they had walked off the set of The Hunger Games. As is typical, some of the celebrities opted to make political statements. AOC and Representative Carolyn Maloney's were particularly on the nose. They literally wrote the message directly onto their clothing. Maloney's dress said equal rights for women, and AOC's said tax the rich. Many conservative commentators asserted that AOC was guilty of hypocrisy for decrying the wealthy while partying with them at a celebrity event that cost $30,000 a ticket. AOC countered that she had attended as part of her responsibility to keep cultural institutions accessible to the public, whatever that means. I think many conservatives are calling out the wrong thing here, though. AOC is right that she can oppose wealth inequality while still participating in events with wealthy people. It might look a little suspicious, but it's not. I don't think it's hypocritical in truth. The real hypocrisy is the fact that AOC and her celebrity pals at the Met Gala get to take the night off whenever they feel like it from following pandemic restrictions. That was the appalling sight. Maskless celebrities hobnobbing while the lesser folks kept following orders. AOC says she's working to keep the Met accessible to the public, but when the public comes to the museum, they have to wear masks. The Met's policies state that everyone over the age of 2 has to wear a mask inside. You have to mask your young child to bring them to this museum. For some reason, though, really famous people, they get an exception. The Met also requires vaccination, of course. That's consistent with New York City's vaccine mandate, which requires vaccination in a variety of circumstances: eating at a restaurant, going to the gym, etc. Some people are exempt, though. visiting athletes, performing artists, and their entourages. That's in the law. The vaccine mandate doesn't make exceptions for religious or conscientious objectors or for those who've had a prior infection. But if you're a famous person, the city won't make you show a vaccine card. Such people were also exempt from last year's quarantine orders. If the pandemic is over for Timothée Chalamet and Lil Nas X and Dan Levy and Billie Eilish, shouldn't it be over for everyone? All over the country, young children sit in classrooms all day, wearing masks, socially distancing when possible, enduring all sorts of disruptions to their daily lives. Regular people are still reorienting their lives to deal with random school closures, closures of vital public services, and irritating requirements. But the ruling class just doesn't put up with restrictions anymore. They get to do whatever they want. And I think it's pretty frustrating because not because I want the pandemic restrictions. I want all people to enjoy the freedom that the ruling class seems to now be enjoying, or at least all people who are vaccinated. The science says they can get on with their lives, but the government won't let them. But then things like this happen. Am I crazy to be so irritated by this?
No, and this is, in California, this is why myself, I was upset and wanted to recall Gavin Newsom, was because he made Hollywood an essential service.
Yes.
So people were able to go back to filming their TV shows and movies while he continued to keep small businesses in our neighborhoods shut down. I mean, it just showcased that if you're in a certain class, and just like what we saw with, and granted with Nancy Pelosi's fundraiser or whatever it was, they were sitting down eating, and then the servers were all walking around wearing masks. And the photograph you show there with all of the people in the back, the servers for the gala sitting there, wearing their masks, and the celebrities don't have to. And my guess is, to your point, I bet all of them, if you're even going to work at the Met Gala, you have to be vaccinated, right? So they can't just use the excuse of, well, but all the celebrities, they had to show that they were vaccinated. I'm sure the workers did too. And yet, right. Only some of them have to wear masks. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, and I also think that if we would be more reasonable about the restrictions, we would also encourage more people to uptake the vaccine. Because a ton of people got the jab. They weren't necessarily sure that they wanted it, but they got the shot because it was going to be their passport, so to speak, back into normal life. And that is the reason that people are doing it, because they want to get out of this. This is a nightmare. People want their lives back. And so if you can tell them you will get your life back, then you're going to get more people who are like, okay, fine. There might be some risk with it. This is a new thing, but I want my life back bad enough that I will get this vaccine. But if
go ahead.
No, it's just if you tell people that you get the vaccine, but you still are under all of these restrictions, then it's like, well, does it not work? Why are you telling me this? It sows doubt in it, and it also disincentivizes you from taking it. But go ahead, Kim.
Well, I mean, I think there's no greater example of this, but in the universities. We're seeing all across the country in these universities that had vaccine mandates, and they now have populations amongst their staff and their students where the vaccination rate is in the 90s, some of them even in the upper 90s, up to 98% of everybody in their community is vaccinated. And even many of them are in high vaccination states, right? So and what are we seeing? University after university after university shutting down. We see them closing the cafeterias. Students can't dine with one another. They've limited student activities. They've told everybody they have to go back to wearing masks indoors. They're not allowed to do things. Some of the schools are talking about sending everyone home. If you talk to college students around the country right now, they'll tell you their schools are saying that they might be sending them home and not to return at the Christmas vacation. And these are highly vaccinated communities, but they're seeing spread. They've got outbreaks, and so they're saying, oh no, and they're reeling back into this. I mean, I've always taken the stance of, and what we do in my family is testing. We test no matter the status before we go visit our grandmothers who are in their 90s. We wear N95 masks or KN95 masks if we can't get an N95 mask when we're around those who are more vulnerable. And, but here we are. It's like, well, if you're one class or if you're one status, you get certain restrictions or the restrictions lifted and others have to live as second-class citizens, and it doesn't make any sense.
People have to be losing their minds that we're, going into a second year of some of these things. And last year on college campuses, there was enforcement of people who, illicitly saw their friends or illicitly, did not dine alone every evening. And there were universities that expelled students over this. And, there goes you're going to be loan debt. You've been expelled from a university, which makes it impossible to get into another one. Your immediate and long-term financial prospects are ruined if this happens to you. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's that level of enforcement for the crazy things they're doing since you brought up colleges. I was looking at Connecticut College. They're having an outbreak, and the kids are like, they have to wear masks and socially distance outside, and that is the only circumstance under which they're like allowed to interact with anyone who doesn't literally live in their dorm, which is crazy. Anyway, up next, Team Rising joins us to break down Gavin Newsom's victory over Larry Elder. Stay tuned for that. You won't want to miss it.